You've been lied to about empaths. Everyone talks about how empaths are angels walking among us, pure souls who feel your pain and heal your wounds, the kind of people who would never hurt a fly. But that's only half the story. The other half is hidden in shadows, and what lurks there is far more dangerous than you could ever imagine. Behind that gentle smile and those understanding eyes, there's a side of empaths that nobody wants to talk about. A side that can destroy you without you even realizing what's happening. Most people believe empaths are the kindest souls on earth. They think these sensitive people are incapable of causing harm. Society has painted them as healers, as natural therapists, as the shoulder everyone can cry on. We see them as emotionally intelligent beings, who use their gifts only for good. The world tells us that if someone can feel what you're feeling, they must want to help you. This is the image we've been sold for years. The truth is, this belief could be your biggest mistake. What you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about empaths. There are two faces to this story, and the second one is rarely discussed. Some empaths possess the ability to read you like an open book, understand your deepest fears, your hidden insecurities, your vulnerable moments, and then use all of that against you. They know exactly which buttons to push because they installed those buttons themselves. Others start out genuine, but after years of being hurt and drained by the world around them, something inside them breaks. Their kindness turns into coldness. Their compassion becomes calculation. The person who once healed others now knows precisely how to inflict the deepest wounds. In this video, you'll learn about the dark empath, a personality type that scientists are only beginning to understand. You'll discover how these individuals combine emotional intelligence with manipulation tactics that would make a master con artist jealous. We'll expose the 5 warning signs that someone in your life might be using empathy as a weapon against you. You'll understand why regular empaths can turn dark when pushed beyond their limits, and what makes their revenge so devastatingly effective. More importantly, you'll learn exactly how to protect yourself from both types before they cause permanent damage to your mental health and self-esteem. The statistics might shock you. Research shows that nearly 18% of the population displays dark empath traits. That means almost 1 in 5 people you meet could be using their emotional gifts to control rather than connect. These aren't rare monsters hiding in dark alleys. They're your coworkers, your friends, sometimes even your romantic partners. They're sitting across from you at dinner, nodding sympathetically while planning 3 steps ahead. The scariest part is how normal they appear on the surface. Stay until the end because we'll reveal the protection strategies that mental health professionals use to identify and deal with these individuals. Knowledge is your strongest defense, and by the time this video ends, you'll have the tools to recognize manipulation disguised as empathy. If you value your emotional safety and want to build genuine relationships instead of toxic ones, you cannot afford to miss what comes next. Welcome to our channel, where we uncover the psychological truths that others are afraid to discuss. We bring you insights that protect your mental health and help you navigate the complex world of human behavior. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because we post content like this regularly and you'll want to stay informed. Let's dive into the hidden world of empaths and their dark side. The first warning sign appears so subtle that most people miss it completely. When you meet a dark empath, they seem to understand you on a level that feels almost magical. Within minutes of conversation, they've picked up on things about you that even close friends haven't noticed. They comment on the slight tension in your voice. They notice when you're holding back tears. They can tell when you're pretending to be okay. This feels incredible at first. Finally, someone who truly gets you. Finally, someone who sees past the mask you wear for the world. You start sharing things you've never told anyone. Your childhood wounds, your current struggles, your secret fears about the future. They listen with such intensity, such focus, such apparent care. Every word you say seems to matter to them. They nod at exactly the right moments. They ask follow-up questions that show they're really paying attention. You feel validated in ways you've never experienced before. But here's what's actually happening behind that caring facade. They're not just listening to connect with you. They're gathering ammunition. Every vulnerability you reveal becomes a weapon in their arsenal. Every insecurity you confess becomes a pressure point they can exploit later. They're building a detailed map of your emotional landscape, marking every weak spot, every trigger, every soft place where you can be hurt. When you tell them about your fear of abandonment stemming from your parents' divorce, they file that information away. When you mention your insecurity about your intelligence because a teacher once called you stupid, they make a mental note. When you share your anxiety about not being good enough in your career, they catalog that weakness. The dark empath doesn't forget any of this. They absorb it all with perfect recall. Days or weeks later, when they want something from you or need to regain control, they'll use these vulnerabilities against you. They'll make comments that seem innocent to others but cut you deeply because they know your wounds. If you try to set a boundary, they'll subtly reference your fear of abandonment to make you feel guilty for pushing them away. If you question their behavior, they'll make a casual remark about your intelligence that triggers that old childhood pain. If you achieve success, they'll undermine it by poking at your imposter syndrome. The cruelest part is how they deliver these attacks. They don't scream or obviously insult you. Their tone stays gentle, even concerned. They phrase their manipulations as observations or questions. Other people watching wouldn't understand why their words affect you so deeply. Only you know they've just pressed directly on your most painful bruise. This creates a trap that's nearly impossible to escape. You told them these things in confidence, trusting they would hold your vulnerabilities with care. Instead, they weaponized your honesty. You start to regret ever opening up. You blame yourself for sharing too much, for trusting too quickly, for being so naive. This is exactly what they want. They want you to feel exposed and unsafe. They want you to believe that leaving them means losing the only person who truly understands you. The reality is the opposite. They understand you only to control you. Their insight into your emotions is a tool for manipulation, not connection. The second warning sign involves a level of charm that feels almost too good to be true. When a dark empath enters your life, they often make an entrance that's memorable. They're not awkward or nervous like most people meeting someone new. They're smooth, confident, engaging. They know exactly what to say to make you feel special. They compliment you in ways that feel specific and genuine, not generic flattery. They remember small details you mentioned in passing. They laugh at your jokes with real enthusiasm. They seem fascinated by your stories. Within a short time, you feel like you've known them for years. The connection feels instant, natural, effortless. What makes this especially powerful is their ability to mirror your emotions with uncanny accuracy. When you're excited about something, they match your energy perfectly. When you're sad, they reflect that sadness back to you. When you're angry about an injustice, they seem equally outraged. This mirroring creates a sense of deep compatibility. You think you've finally met someone on your wavelength, someone who feels things the way you do, someone who shares your values and your perspective on life. The bond forms quickly and intensely. You start to believe this person is your soulmate, your best friend, your perfect match. But underneath this perfect reflection, something is missing. Their charm is calculated, not spontaneous. Their mirroring is strategic, not authentic. They've studied what makes people feel connected, and they're executing that formula with precision. Real emotional connection involves some friction, some difference, some moments where you don't perfectly align. Real people have their own reactions that don't always match yours. Real friends sometimes challenge your perspective or feel differently about situations. The dark empath eliminates all of this natural variation. They become whoever you need them to be in that moment. This isn't because they genuinely feel what you feel. It's because they've learned that mirroring creates trust, and trust creates access, and access creates control. Research on emotional manipulation confirms that dark empaths excel at cognitive empathy while lacking emotional empathy. They can intellectually understand what you're feeling without actually feeling it themselves. They observe your facial expressions, your tone of voice, your body language. They process this information and generate the appropriate response, much like an actor playing a role. The performance is convincing because they've practiced it extensively, they've watched how genuine empathy looks, and they've learned to replicate it. But there's no real feeling behind it. When they mirror your sadness, they're not actually sad. When they mirror your joy, they're not actually joyful. They're simply reflecting back what will make you trust them most. Over time, cracks appear in this perfect facade. You start to notice moments when their reactions seem slightly off. A delay before they respond emotionally, as if they're calculating what they should feel. A mismatch between their words and their eyes. charm that feels rehearsed rather than spontaneous. But by the time you notice these inconsistencies, you're already emotionally invested. You've already built your relationship on the foundation of that initial perfect connection. Questioning it now means questioning everything. So most people ignore these red flags. They tell themselves they're being paranoid or overthinking. The dark empath counts on this. They know that once they've established themselves as your perfect mirror, you'll work hard to maintain that illusion even when evidence suggests otherwise. The third warning sign is perhaps the most psychologically damaging of all. Dark empaths are masters of gaslighting, and their emotional intelligence makes them exceptionally skilled at this form of manipulation. Gaslighting is when someone makes you question your own perception of reality. They deny things that happened. They insist you remember events incorrectly. They twist your words and actions until you no longer trust your own mind. In the hands of a dark empath, this tactic becomes devastatingly effective because they understand exactly how to destabilize your sense of certainty. It starts small. You mention something they said last week, and they claim they never said it. You're confident about the conversation. You remember the context, the location, even what you were both wearing. But they look at you with such genuine confusion, such sincere concern, that you start to doubt yourself. Maybe you did misremember. Maybe you confused them with someone else. Maybe your memory isn't as reliable as you thought. They reinforce this doubt by being kind about it. They don't accuse you of lying. They just gently suggest you might be mistaken. They might even express worry about your stress levels or your mental state. This plants a seed of uncertainty that grows every time they deny reality. As the relationship continues, the gaslighting escalates. They make plans with you, then claim you imagined the conversation. They say hurtful things, then insist you're being too sensitive and they were clearly joking. They commit to helping you with something, then act shocked when you mention it, saying they never agreed to any such thing. Each incident individually seems minor. You could be misremembering, you could be overreacting, you could be mistaken. But the pattern creates a cumulative effect. You start to question everything. Did that conversation really happen the way you remember? Did they actually promise what you think they promised? Are you being too sensitive? Are you going crazy? The dark empath enhances this confusion by being selectively reliable. Sometimes they remember things perfectly, even better than you do. They'll recall a detail from months ago that you'd forgotten. This proves their memory works fine, which makes their convenient forgetting of other events seem more credible. If they can remember what you ordered at dinner 3 months ago, surely they would remember promising to help you move last week. So maybe you really are confused. Maybe the problem is your perception, not their behavior. What makes this particularly insidious is how they use your own emotions against you during gaslighting. Because they understand your emotional patterns so well, they know exactly when you're most vulnerable to doubt. If you're already anxious, they'll exploit that anxiety by suggesting you're overthinking things. If you're already depressed, they'll use that depression to imply your negative perception is distorting reality. If you're angry, they'll point to your anger as evidence that you're being irrational. Your feelings, which should be valid data about your experience, become evidence of your unreliability. They position themselves as the calm, rational one while you spiral into self-doubt. Over months or years of this treatment, you lose trust in your own mind. You second-guess every memory, every perception, every feeling. Before confronting them about something, you rehearse extensively, trying to make sure you have your facts straight. You start documenting conversations and events because you can't trust yourself to remember accurately. You apologize constantly for misunderstanding or misremembering things that you actually perceived correctly the first time. This erosion of self-trust is the goal. When you don't trust yourself, you become dependent on them to tell you what's real. They become your interpreter of reality, and that gives them ultimate control. The fourth warning sign reveals itself through guilt. Dark empaths are exceptionally skilled at making you feel responsible for their emotional state. They use their understanding of emotions to create a sense of obligation that keeps you trapped. Normal relationships involve some mutual responsibility for each other's well-being, but dark empaths take this to an extreme. They make you feel like their happiness, their stability, their entire emotional world depends entirely on you. If they're upset, it's because you did something wrong. If they're disappointed, it's because you failed them. If they're anxious, it's because you're not being supportive enough. This emotional debt starts accumulating from the beginning of the relationship. They do things for you, often things you didn't ask for, then use those actions to create obligation. They go out of their way to help you with something, making a big show of the sacrifice involved. They listen to you talk about your problems for hours, subtly keeping track of the time they've invested. They give you gifts that feel generous but come with invisible strings attached. Later, when they want something from you or when you try to set a boundary, they remind you of everything they've done. Not always explicitly. Sometimes it's just a mention of how tired they are from always being there for you. Sometimes it's a sad comment about how they prioritize your needs over their own. The message is clear: you owe them. The guilt becomes a tool for control. When you can't meet up with them because you're busy, they don't just express disappointment. They make you feel like you're abandoning them in their time of need. They might mention how alone they feel, how much they were looking forward to seeing you, how hard their week has been. Suddenly, your legitimate need for personal time becomes a selfish act that's hurting someone who cares about you. When you disagree with them about something, they don't just argue their point. They make you feel like disagreeing means you don't value them or trust them. They might say things like how much it hurts when you don't believe them, or how they thought you understood them better than this. Your difference of opinion becomes a personal betrayal. What makes this particularly effective is their ability to frame their manipulation as vulnerability. They're not trying to control you, they're just being honest about their feelings. They're just sharing how your actions affect them. How can you be upset with someone for expressing their emotions? This is where their emotional intelligence becomes a weapon. They know that empathetic people, which many of their targets are, feel responsible when they learn they've hurt someone. The dark empath exploits this by constantly being hurt by normal boundary setting and self-care. You want to spend time with other friends? They're hurt that you're choosing others over them. You need a night alone to recharge? They're hurt that you don't want to be with them. You can't help them with something because you have your own commitments? They're hurt that you're not there when they need you. Every act of self-preservation becomes an act of cruelty in their framing. You start to feel guilty for having needs, for having boundaries, for having a life outside of managing their emotions. The relationship becomes a one-way street where you're constantly trying to prove you care enough, do enough, sacrifice enough. The tragedy is that nothing you do will ever be enough. The guilt is not about your actual behavior, it's about control. If they can keep you feeling guilty, they can keep you compliant. They can keep you apologizing, trying harder, putting their needs first. The moment you stop feeling guilty is the moment you might leave, and they can't allow that, so they continually move the goalposts. You do what they asked, but it wasn't quite enough or wasn't done quite right. You meet their stated need, but now they have a new one. You prove your care in one way, but they need you to prove it differently. The guilt never resolves because resolution would mean loss of control. The fifth warning sign is the confusing pattern of hot and cold behavior that leaves you constantly off balance. One day the dark empath is warm, affectionate, attentive. They message you constantly, they make plans, they tell you how important you are to them. They're the person you fell for initially, the one who made you feel so seen and valued. Then, without warning or explanation, they go cold. Messages go unanswered for hours or days. Plans get canceled at the last minute. When you do interact, they're distant, distracted, or irritable. The warmth has vanished, replaced by indifference or barely concealed annoyance. You have no idea what changed or what you did wrong. This pattern creates intense anxiety. During the warm phases, you feel relieved and hopeful. Maybe things are getting better. Maybe you were overthinking their previous coldness. Maybe the relationship is back on track. You relax into the connection, let your guard down, start to trust again. Then the coldness returns and you're thrown back into confusion and self-blame. You replay recent interactions, searching for what you said or did that caused them to withdraw. You message them asking if everything is okay, which sometimes brings back the warmth temporarily, but other times makes the coldness worse. You never know which response you'll get. The psychological term for this is intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the most powerful tools for creating addiction and dependency. When rewards come unpredictably, when you sometimes get what you want and sometimes don't, your brain becomes hyper-focused on figuring out the pattern. You become more invested in the relationship during the cold phases than you ever were during consistent warmth. You start to crave those moments of connection more intensely because you can't count on them. The dark empath understands this dynamic, whether consciously or instinctively. They know that being consistently warm would allow you to relax and potentially realize the relationship isn't actually that fulfilling. They know that being consistently cold would drive you away. But alternating between the two keeps you hooked, always chasing the next warm phase, always trying to prevent the next cold one. During cold phases, they might withdraw physically and emotionally while making it clear they're fine with everyone else. You see them posting on social media, laughing with other friends, fully engaged with the world, just not with you. This creates the painful belief that the problem is specifically you. If they were generally struggling or going through something difficult, their withdrawal would make sense. But they're clearly capable of connection and warmth. They're just choosing not to extend it to you right now. This makes you try harder to win back their attention. You become more accommodating, more compliant, more willing to ignore your own needs. You're essentially training yourself to accept less and less while giving more and more. The warm phases feel so good because they contrast with the coldness. If someone is consistently kind to you, you appreciate it, but you also come to expect it. When someone is cold to you, then suddenly warm again, that warmth feels like a gift, like something special you've earned. The dark empath becomes associated with the relief from the pain they themselves created. You start to feel grateful for basic decency, for the bare minimum of respect and affection. Your standards drop. Behavior you would never have accepted at the beginning of the relationship becomes something you tolerate, even defend. After all, they're not always cold. They have these wonderful warm moments. You just need to figure out how to have more of those and fewer of the cold ones. This is exactly the trap they've set. You're now spending all your energy trying to manage their behavior, trying to keep them in warm mode, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering cold mode. You're hyper-vigilant, constantly monitoring their mood, their tone, their level of engagement. The relationship has become a puzzle you're desperately trying to solve, a game where the rules keep changing and you never quite win. Meanwhile, the dark empath maintains complete control without even having to articulate what they want. Their alternating behavior trains you more effectively than any direct demand could. When you try to talk to them about this pattern, they deny it exists. They claim you're being too sensitive or too needy. They accuse you of keeping score or holding grudges. They might even flip the script entirely, suggesting that you're the one who's hot and cold, that they're just responding to your energy. Your legitimate attempt to address a harmful pattern becomes more evidence of your problematic nature. You end up apologizing for bringing it up, promising to be less demanding, accepting their version of reality where the pattern doesn't exist or is somehow your fault. Friends and family watching from outside might tell you to just leave. They can see the pattern clearly. They watch you light up when the person is warm and crash when the person is cold. They see how much energy you spend analyzing every interaction, every message, every sign of warming or cooling. They recognize the classic signs of emotional manipulation, but you can't see it so clearly from inside. During warm phases, you defend the relationship fiercely. You tell your concerned friends that they don't understand, that things are actually really good now, that you're both working on things. During cold phases, you might admit things are hard, but you still believe you can fix it if you just figure out the right approach. This is the power of intermittent reinforcement combined with emotional intelligence. The dark empath keeps you just hopeful enough to stay, just confused enough not to see the pattern clearly, just invested enough to keep trying. They've created a dynamic where you're always auditioning for their approval, always trying to earn consistent warmth, always believing it's just within reach if you could only be better, do better, understand them better. The truth is that the inconsistency is the point. It's not a problem to be solved, it's a tool to maintain control. The moment you accept consistent warmth is something you deserve rather than something you have to earn. The moment you recognize that their cold phases are choices they make rather than reactions you cause, is the moment their power over you begins to dissolve. Understanding why dark empaths exist requires looking at the psychology behind this complex personality profile. The term dark empath is not an official clinical diagnosis found in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. You won't find a therapist who can formally diagnose someone as a dark empath the way they might diagnose depression or anxiety. Instead, this term describes a specific combination of personality traits that researchers have only recently begun to study in depth. The concept emerged from psychological research examining what happens when high emotional intelligence combines with darker personality characteristics. Scientists wanted to understand how someone could possess deep insight into human emotions while also using that insight for harmful purposes. The foundation of dark empath psychology lies in what researchers call the dark triad. This is a group of 3 personality traits that tend to appear together in certain individuals. The first trait is narcissism, which involves an inflated sense of self-importance, a deep need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. Narcissists believe they're special, superior, and deserving of preferential treatment. They expect constant praise and validation. When they don't receive it, they react with anger or contempt. The narcissistic component of dark empathy drives the need for control and the belief that manipulating others is justified because the dark empath's needs matter more than anyone else's. The second trait is Machiavellianism, named after the Italian political philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli, who wrote about manipulation and cunning in leadership. People high in Machiavellianism are strategic, calculating, and focused on personal gain. They view relationships as transactions where the goal is to come out ahead. They're skilled at deception and have no moral qualms about lying, cheating, or manipulating if it serves their purposes. They plan several steps ahead, always thinking about how to position themselves advantageously. The Machiavellian component of dark empathy provides the strategic framework for manipulation. It's what turns emotional insight into a calculated tool rather than a basis for connection. The third trait is psychopathy, which in this context doesn't mean a violent criminal, but rather a subclinical version involving emotional shallowness, impulsivity, and lack of remorse. People with psychopathic traits experience emotions differently than others. They don't feel guilt the way most people do. They don't experience deep emotional bonds. They can be charming and engaging on the surface while remaining emotionally detached underneath. They take risks without considering consequences and act on impulses without restraint. The psychopathic component of dark empathy explains why these individuals can hurt others without feeling bad about it. They might understand intellectually that they've caused pain, but that understanding doesn't translate into remorse or behavioral change. Traditionally, researchers believed people with dark triad traits lacked empathy entirely. Narcissists were too self-absorbed to notice other people's feelings. Machiavellians were too focused on strategy to care about emotions. Psychopaths simply didn't have the neurological capacity for emotional connection. But then researchers discovered something unexpected. Some individuals scored high on all 3 dark triad traits while also scoring high on measures of cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy is the ability to understand what someone else is thinking or feeling. It's perspective-taking, the capacity to mentally put yourself in another person's shoes. This is different from emotional empathy, which is actually feeling what another person feels. Dark empaths possess cognitive empathy without emotional empathy. They can read your emotional state accurately. They understand what you're going through. They know what words would comfort you and what actions would hurt you, but they don't actually feel your pain or your joy. Your emotions are information to them, data to be processed and potentially used. This combination makes them far more dangerous than traditional dark triad individuals. A narcissist who can't read emotions might hurt you through obliviousness. A dark empath hurts you with full awareness and precision. They know exactly where the knife goes for maximum damage. Research has found that dark empaths represent approximately 19% of studied populations. That's nearly 1 in 5 people. They're not rare anomalies. They're a significant portion of the population moving through society, often quite successfully. Many dark empaths function well in professional settings. Their charm and emotional intelligence help them climb corporate ladders. Their strategic thinking makes them effective leaders, at least in terms of achieving goals, if not in terms of employee well-being. Their ability to read rooms and navigate social dynamics serves them in networking and negotiation. From the outside, they often appear highly competent and socially skilled. Only those in close personal relationships with them see the darker side. But not all dark empaths are born this way. The other path to darkness is through wounding, and this is where regular empaths can develop a shadow side that looks similar to dark empathy, even though the underlying psychology differs. True empaths are people born with nervous systems that process emotional information more deeply than average. They pick up on subtle cues that others miss. They feel things intensely. They absorb the emotions of people around them like sponges soaking up water. In childhood, this sensitivity often makes them the family peacemakers, the ones who notice when mom is sad or dad is angry before anyone says a word. They learn early to manage other people's emotions to keep themselves safe. Growing up as an empath in a world that doesn't value sensitivity takes a toll. Teachers tell them to toughen up. Parents say they're overreacting. Peers mock them for being too emotional. The message they receive repeatedly is that their natural way of being is wrong, problematic, too much. They learn to suppress their feelings to fit in. They build walls around their hearts to avoid the constant overwhelm of absorbing everyone else's pain. These walls are necessary for survival in a harsh world, but they change the empath fundamentally. What was once an open channel of emotional flow becomes guarded and controlled. Years of absorbing other people's pain without proper boundaries creates a kind of emotional burnout. The empath gives and gives and gives until there's nothing left. They've listened to countless problems, offered endless support, sacrificed their own needs to help others, and often received little appreciation in return. People take their emotional labor for granted. The empath becomes the designated therapist for friends and family, expected to be available at all times, never allowed to have their own struggles because they're supposed to be the strong one, the understanding one, the one who always knows what to say. This creates deep resentment that the empath usually doesn't feel permitted to express. When an empath finally reaches their breaking point, something shifts. All that suppressed anger, all that unacknowledged hurt, all that exhaustion from years of people-pleasing erupts from the shadow. The person who was once warm and giving becomes cold and withholding. The person who never said a harsh word suddenly speaks with cutting precision. They know everyone's vulnerabilities because people have spent years confiding in them. Now when someone crosses a line or takes advantage one time too many, the empath uses that knowledge like a weapon. They don't just set boundaries, they burn bridges. They don't just express anger, they deliver devastating truths designed to wound as deeply as they've been wounded. This is what psychologists call the shadow side, the parts of ourselves we repress and deny because they don't fit our self-image. Empaths often identify strongly as kind, caring, selfless people. They build their entire identity around being helpful and understanding. But underneath that identity lives all the darkness they've suppressed, the rage at being used, the contempt for people who are emotionally lazy and expect the empath to do their emotional work for them, the satisfaction in watching someone who hurt them finally experience consequences. The desire to stop caring, to stop helping, to let people suffer the way the empath has suffered in silence. When the shadow emerges, it can be brutal. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist who developed the concept of the shadow, believed that the brighter someone's light, the darker their shadow. Empaths who identify most strongly with being good and pure often have the most dangerous shadow sides because they've repressed more. They've never integrated their capacity for anger, for selfishness, for cruelty. These qualities don't disappear just because they're denied. They accumulate in the unconscious, growing stronger, waiting for the moment when the empath's defenses finally crack. When that moment comes, the eruption can shock everyone, including the empath themselves. The wounded empath's revenge often takes the form of complete withdrawal. They don't argue or fight, they simply disappear. After years of being the person everyone could count on, they become unavailable. Phone calls go unreturned. Messages are read but not answered. Invitations are declined without explanation. People who depended on their emotional support suddenly find themselves cut off. This silent exit is psychologically devastating to those left behind, especially narcissists and other emotionally immature people who relied on the empath to regulate their feelings. The empath was their mirror, their therapist, their emotional container. Without that presence, these people often fall apart, finally forced to face the inner work they'd been avoiding. What makes the wounded empath different from a true dark empath is the presence of guilt and pain. The dark empath manipulates without remorse. The wounded empath who lashes out or withdraws often feels terrible about it afterward. They struggle with the conflict between their actions and their values. They question whether they're becoming the very thing they've always feared. This internal conflict is actually a sign of remaining empathy. They still care about the impact of their behavior. They still feel bad about hurting people, even people who hurt them first. The dark empath feels no such conflict. Their behavior aligns perfectly with their belief that they're entitled to use others however they see fit. Over time, a wounded empath can heal and integrate their shadow without becoming permanently dark. They can learn to set boundaries without cruelty. They can express anger without weaponizing their emotional knowledge. They can say no without disappearing. They can protect themselves without becoming the manipulator. This healing requires acknowledging that they have darkness within them, that they're capable of harm, that being empathetic doesn't make them morally superior to others. It requires accepting their full humanity, light and shadow together. When an empath completes this integration, they become powerful in a healthy way. They keep their emotional intelligence but add discernment, boundaries, and self-protection. Understanding these two different paths to apparent dark empathy matters for protection. If you're dealing with a true dark empath with dark triad traits, no amount of love or understanding will change them. Their manipulation is fundamental to who they are. They don't want to change because from their perspective, they're winning. The relationship will only end when you leave or when they find a better supply source. But if you're dealing with a wounded empath in their shadow phase, there might be possibility for healing and repair if both people are willing to do deep work. The key is recognizing which situation you're in, and that requires looking at patterns over time rather than isolated incidents. Protecting yourself from dark empaths, whether the dark triad variety or the wounded empath variety, starts with learning to trust your instincts. Your body knows before your mind does when something is wrong. You might not be able to articulate exactly what's off, but you feel it. A tightness in your chest when you see their name on your phone, a knot in your stomach before you meet up with them, a sense of exhaustion after spending time together that goes beyond normal tiredness. These physical sensations are your nervous system trying to warn you. In our modern world, we've been trained to ignore our bodies and trust our thoughts instead. We talk ourselves out of our gut feelings. We rationalize away our discomfort. We let other people's words override our own internal knowing. The dark empath counts on this. They count on you doubting yourself more than you doubt them. They count on you being polite, giving the benefit of the doubt, trying to see the best in people. These are generally good qualities, but they become vulnerabilities when dealing with manipulative individuals. Learning to trust your gut means paying attention when your body signals danger, even if your mind can't find a logical reason. It means taking your own discomfort seriously, instead of dismissing it as paranoia or oversensitivity. It means recognizing that if someone makes you feel consistently bad about yourself, the relationship is harmful regardless of their intentions or explanations. Your intuition speaks through feelings, sensations, and subtle knowing that bypasses rational thought. When you're with someone and you suddenly feel small, anxious, or wrong, that's information. When someone's words say one thing but their energy feels completely different, that dissonance is information. When you find yourself constantly explaining away concerning behavior or making excuses for someone, that pattern is information. Dark empaths are skilled at making everything seem reasonable when examined logically. They have explanations for their behavior. They have justifications for their demands. They can make you feel unreasonable for being upset, but they can't fake the way they make your nervous system respond. Your body keeps the score even when your mind is confused. Trusting your gut also means honoring your first impressions before you talk yourself out of them. Often people report that they had an uneasy feeling about a dark empath when they first met, but they dismissed it because the person seemed so charming and everyone else liked them. That initial unease was accurate. The charm was the manipulation already beginning. By the time the relationship revealed its true nature, they'd invested so much that leaving felt impossible. If you can honor your instincts early, you protect yourself from getting entangled in the first place. This doesn't mean being paranoid or suspicious of everyone. It means taking your own reactions seriously and not forcing yourself into relationships that don't feel right just because they look right on paper. The second protection strategy involves watching for patterns rather than getting lost in individual incidents. One instance of forgetfulness might be genuine. Repeated selective memory where they always forget things that inconvenience them but remember things that benefit them is a pattern. One moment of coldness might be a bad day. A cycle of warmth and withdrawal that repeats over months is a pattern. One guilt-inducing comment might be accidental. Consistently making you feel responsible for their emotional state is a pattern. Dark empaths are skilled at making each incident seem isolated and explainable. They count on you not connecting the dots across time. Keeping track of patterns requires some form of documentation, even if it's just mental notes. When something feels off, make a note of it. What happened? What was said? How did you feel? When you start noticing the same type of incident occurring repeatedly, you're seeing a pattern. This is especially important with gaslighting, where the dark empath denies previous conversations or events. If you have your own record, you can trust your memory instead of accepting their revised version of history. Some people find it helpful to keep a journal of interactions with someone they suspect might be manipulative. This isn't about building a case against them. It's about maintaining your own grip on reality when someone is actively trying to undermine it. Patterns also reveal themselves in how someone behaves across different contexts. A dark empath might be charming and delightful in public settings where they're performing for an audience, but cold and critical in private where there are no witnesses. They might treat service workers or people they consider beneath them with contempt, while being respectful to those who have power or status. They might have a trail of destroyed relationships in their past, always with explanations for why the other person was the problem. When you step back and look at the full picture rather than focusing on how they treat you in this moment, patterns of behavior become clear. The challenge is that recognizing patterns requires time, and dark empaths often move the relationship forward quickly to prevent this kind of observation. They push for rapid intimacy, exclusive commitment, enmeshment before you've had a chance to see them in multiple contexts over an extended period. This rush is itself a warning sign. Healthy relationships develop organically over time. Manipulative relationships involve pressure to commit before you've gathered enough information to make an informed choice. If someone is pushing you to trust them completely, share your deepest secrets, or commit to them before you've known them long enough to observe patterns, slow down. Genuine connection can wait. Manipulation needs speed to succeed. The third protection strategy is setting and maintaining strong boundaries, and this is where many people struggle most. Boundaries are limits you set about what behavior you will and won't accept, what you will and won't do, and what access others have to your time, energy, and emotions. Dark empaths hate boundaries because boundaries limit their control. They will test your boundaries repeatedly, pushing to see if you really mean what you say. They'll make you feel guilty for having limits. They'll act hurt or offended. They'll accuse you of not caring enough or not being there for them. They'll frame your self-protection as your failure. Setting boundaries with a dark empath requires accepting that they will react negatively and holding your ground anyway. You don't need to justify or explain your boundaries extensively. Simple, clear statements work best. No, I can't do that. I'm not available then. I don't discuss that topic. I need space right now. Their reaction is not your responsibility. If setting a reasonable boundary causes a meltdown, that's information about them, not evidence that your boundary was wrong. Healthy people might be disappointed when you say no, but they respect your right to have limits. Manipulative people escalate, punish, or try to negotiate your boundaries away. Guilt is the primary weapon dark empaths use against boundaries. They make you feel selfish for prioritizing your own needs. They make you feel cruel for not accommodating their requests. They make you feel like a bad friend, partner, or family member for refusing to sacrifice yourself. This guilt works especially well on empathetic people who are naturally inclined to care about others' feelings. The trap is believing that caring about someone means having no boundaries with them. The truth is that sustainable relationships require boundaries. Without them, resentment builds until the relationship collapses. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They're gates that allow you to choose what comes in and what stays out, maintaining the relationship while protecting yourself. Walking away is sometimes the only boundary that works. If someone repeatedly violates your stated limits, if they punish you for having boundaries, if the relationship requires you to have no needs of your own, leaving might be your only option for self-preservation. This feels impossible when you're emotionally entangled, when you've invested years, when they've convinced you that no one else will understand you the way they do. But staying in a relationship that requires you to abandon yourself is a form of slow self-destruction. It might take time to build the strength to leave. You might need support. You might need a plan, especially if you're dealing with someone who will retaliate. But recognizing that leaving is an option, even if you're not ready to exercise it yet, is an important first step. The fourth protection strategy is limiting contact with dark empaths when complete separation isn't possible. Maybe they're a coworker you can't avoid entirely. Maybe they're a family member who will be at holidays and gatherings. Maybe you share custody of children. In these situations, you can't cut them out completely, but you can minimize their access to you. This means keeping interactions brief and surface level. Don't share personal information that could be used against you later. Don't engage in deep conversations or emotional exchanges. Treat the relationship as professional and transactional rather than personal and intimate. Gray rocking is a technique that works well for limited contact situations. The term comes from making yourself as interesting as a gray rock. You become boring, neutral, unreactive. When the dark empath tries to provoke emotion, you respond with minimal affect. When they fish for information, you give vague, uninteresting answers. When they try to start drama, you don't take the bait. This removes the reward they're seeking, which is your emotional reaction. Dark empaths feed on emotion, both positive and negative. Drama energizes them. Conflict engages them. When you stop providing that fuel, many of them lose interest and find someone else who will give them the reactions they crave. Limiting contact also means reducing your availability. You don't need to respond to every message immediately or at all. You don't need to attend every event where they'll be present. You don't need to explain or justify your absence. Simply being less available creates natural distance. This can feel uncomfortable if you've been trained to always be accessible, but your time and energy are finite resources. Spending them on a relationship that harms you means not spending them on relationships that nourish you or on your own well-being and growth. The fifth protection strategy is seeking professional help, and this is crucial for several reasons. First, a therapist can help you recognize manipulation patterns that you're too close to see clearly. When you're in the middle of a toxic relationship, your perspective gets distorted. You normalize things that are deeply abnormal. You accept treatment that from the outside looks obviously abusive. A skilled therapist provides an external viewpoint, helps you reality test your experiences, and validates your perceptions when gaslighting has made you doubt them. They can identify the specific tactics being used against you and explain why they're harmful, even if they seem subtle. Second, therapy provides a safe space to process the complex emotions that come with these relationships. You might feel angry at the dark empath for manipulating you, but also angry at yourself for not seeing it sooner. You might feel grief over losing what you thought the relationship was, even as you recognize it was never real. You might feel shame for being deceived, fear about trusting anyone again, confusion about what was genuine and what was manipulation. These feelings need somewhere to go. Without proper processing, they can trap you in the past or make you carry wounds into future relationships. A therapist helps you work through this emotional complexity without judgment. Third, healing from manipulation requires rebuilding your sense of self, and this is deep work that benefits from professional guidance. Dark empaths erode your self-trust, your confidence, your understanding of who you are. You've been told repeatedly that your perceptions are wrong, your feelings are invalid, your needs are unreasonable. Recovering from that means learning to trust yourself again, and that's not a quick or easy process. A therapist can guide you through exercises and practices that rebuild self-trust gradually. They can help you identify your own values, needs, and boundaries without the distortion of someone else's manipulation clouding your judgment. Fourth, therapy can address any trauma responses that develop from prolonged manipulation. Many people dealing with dark empaths develop symptoms of complex trauma, including hypervigilance, emotional flashbacks, difficulty regulating emotions, and struggles with trust. These symptoms don't just disappear when the relationship ends, they require treatment. Trauma-informed therapy approaches like EMDR, somatic experiencing, or internal family systems can help process and heal these trauma responses so they don't control your life or your future relationships. Without addressing trauma, you might find yourself attracted to similar dynamics again or so defended that you can't let anyone close. Professional help doesn't have to mean years of therapy, though healing does take time. Even a few sessions with someone who understands emotional manipulation can provide tools and perspectives that change your trajectory. Many therapists now specialize in narcissistic abuse recovery, which overlaps significantly with dark empath manipulation. Support groups, whether in person or online, can also provide community with others who understand what you're experiencing. Feeling less alone in your experience, hearing that others have faced similar tactics and survived, can be powerfully healing. The comfortable lie we've all been told is that empathy automatically makes someone good. We've built entire belief systems around the idea that understanding others' emotions means wanting to help them. We've trusted people simply because they seemed to get us, because they reflected our feelings back to us, because they appeared to care. But this video has shown you a darker truth that most people never want to acknowledge. Empathy is not a virtue in itself. It's a tool, a skill, a capacity that exists independent of morality. Just like intelligence can be used to cure diseases or create weapons, empathy can be used to heal connections or destroy them. The dark empath understands you perfectly and uses that understanding to control you. The wounded empath knows your vulnerabilities because you trusted them with your pain, and when they break, they know exactly where to strike. Both types exist in significant numbers in the population around you. They're not hiding in dark corners wearing signs that say manipulator. They're in your workplace, your friend group, your family, sometimes even in your bed. They look normal, often exceptionally charming and successful. They've learned to weaponize the very thing we're taught to admire most in people. What makes this knowledge so critical is that awareness is your primary defense. Dark empaths rely on your ignorance. They count on you believing that someone who seems to understand you must have good intentions. They depend on you dismissing your gut feelings, ignoring patterns, accepting their explanations over your own experience. The moment you understand how this manipulation works, you become harder to deceive. You start noticing the warning signs early. You recognize when charm feels calculated rather than genuine. You see through the gaslighting because you know what to look for. You feel the guilt trip forming and refuse to take responsibility for their emotional state. You observe the hot and cold pattern and understand it's about control, not about anything you did wrong. But knowledge alone won't protect you if you don't act on it. Many people recognize they're dealing with a dark empath and still stay, hoping the person will change, believing they can love them into wholeness, convinced that leaving would make them the bad person. This is the final trap. Dark empaths with the dark triad traits will not change. Their manipulation is not a phase or a response to circumstances, it's core to their personality structure. They don't see their behavior as a problem because from their perspective it works, they get what they want. Why would they stop? Wounded empaths might heal and integrate their shadow, but only if they choose that path themselves. You cannot heal them by absorbing more abuse. You cannot love someone out of their darkness. The only person you can save in this situation is yourself. Trust yourself more than you trust their words. This is perhaps the most important message you can take from this video. When your body signals danger, listen. When patterns repeat despite promises of change, believe the pattern. When your reality contradicts their version of events, trust your reality. When boundaries feel necessary, set them regardless of their reaction. When leaving feels like the only way to preserve yourself, leave. Dark empaths are masterful at making you doubt all of these instincts. They have explanations that sound reasonable, they have emotions that seem genuine, they have moments of connection that feel real, but your nervous system doesn't lie. Your gut knows what your mind is too confused to see. The people who get free from dark empaths are the ones who finally decide their own well-being matters more than maintaining a toxic relationship. They stop waiting for the other person to validate their experience. They stop trying to prove the manipulation is happening. They simply start trusting their own perceptions enough to act on them. They set boundaries and maintain them through the guilt trips. They limit contact despite the drama that follows. They walk away even though it's hard, even though they've invested years, even though the dark empath tells them they're making a mistake. These people recover their sense of self, rebuild their confidence, and eventually create relationships based on genuine mutual care rather than manipulation disguised as empathy. If you're watching this video because someone in your life exhibits these traits, please understand that you deserve better. You deserve relationships where empathy flows both ways. You deserve someone who understands you and uses that understanding to support you, not control you. You deserve to feel safe expressing your needs without being punished. You deserve consistency rather than chaos. You deserve honesty rather than gaslighting. You deserve to be with people who celebrate your growth rather than feeling threatened by it. These things are not too much to ask for. They're the baseline of healthy human connection. The work ahead might be difficult. Leaving or limiting contact with a dark empath often brings temporary pain. They might escalate their manipulation when they sense you pulling away. They might cycle through every tactic that worked before, trying to hook you back in. They might turn others against you or try to damage your reputation. Your own grief and confusion might make you question your decision. This is where support becomes essential. Lean on the people who see the situation clearly. Work with a therapist who understands manipulation. Trust the process even when it's painful. The temporary discomfort of extraction is nothing compared to the permanent damage of staying. For those watching who recognize dark empath traits in themselves, there's a different path forward. If you're a wounded empath in your shadow phase, you can heal. You can integrate your darkness without letting it control you. You can learn to set boundaries without cruelty, express anger without weaponizing your emotional knowledge. Protect yourself without becoming what you fear. This requires brutal honesty about your behavior and its impact. It requires acknowledging that understanding someone's pain doesn't justify causing more of it. It requires choosing growth over comfort, accountability over defensiveness. Professional help makes this journey significantly easier because patterns you've developed over years won't shift through willpower alone. The world needs people with genuine empathy now more than ever. We need individuals who can understand diverse perspectives, who feel compassion for suffering, who use emotional intelligence to build bridges rather than walls. But we also need discernment. We need to teach people, especially young people, that empathy without boundaries becomes martyrdom, that understanding someone doesn't mean accepting abuse from them, that kindness doesn't require self-destruction. We need to normalize the idea that protecting yourself is not the same as being cold or uncaring. These lessons could prevent countless people from falling into the trap of dark empaths who exploit our cultural worship of selfless sensitivity. Your empathy, if you're someone who possesses it genuinely, is a gift. But like any gift, it needs protection. You wouldn't leave your valuables unguarded for anyone to take. Don't leave your emotional energy, your trust, your care unguarded either. Be selective about who receives your empathy. Watch how people respond to it. Do they appreciate and reciprocate, or do they take and demand more? Do they respect your limits, or do they push constantly for more access? Do they use what you share to deepen connection, or do they store it as ammunition? These distinctions matter enormously. The future you create depends on the choices you make today. You can choose to stay aware, to trust your instincts, to honor your boundaries, to walk away from relationships that diminish you. You can choose to seek help when you need it, to process your experiences rather than bury them, to heal rather than harden. You can choose to remain open to genuine connection while protecting yourself from manipulation. These choices are not easy, but they're essential. Every day you spend in a relationship with a dark empath is a day stolen from the life you could be living, the person you could be becoming, the authentic connections you could be building. This information we've shared today has the power to change lives, possibly save them. Someone you know might be trapped in a relationship with a dark empath right now, confused about why they feel so bad in a relationship with someone who seems so understanding. Someone you love might be blaming themselves for problems that are actually manipulation tactics. Someone in your life might need to hear that their gut feelings are valid, that they're not crazy, that what's happening to them has a name and a pattern. Share this video with them. Send it to anyone who might need this information. You could be the catalyst for someone's liberation from a toxic dynamic they couldn't see clearly until now. If this video resonated with you, if you found value in this information, if you learned something that might protect you or someone you care about, we need you to take action right now. Hit that subscribe button because we create content like this regularly. We dive into the psychological truths that most people avoid discussing. We expose the hidden dynamics that shape relationships and mental health. We give you practical tools for protecting yourself and building a better life. This channel exists to empower you with knowledge that truly matters, and subscribing ensures you never miss these crucial insights. Don't just subscribe and disappear. Click the like button to tell us this content is valuable. The algorithms need to know that people want this information so we can reach even more people who need it. Your like is not just appreciation for us, It's a vote that helps this video find its way to someone who desperately needs to understand what's happening to them. You might save someone from years of manipulation with a single click. Share this video on your social media, send it in group chats, text it to friends who might benefit from understanding dark empaths. The more people who understand these dynamics, the harder it becomes for dark empaths to operate undetected. We create collective immunity through shared knowledge. Every share extends the reach of this information into corners where someone is suffering silently, believing they're alone in their confusion. You have the power to change that for them. Turn on notifications so you're alerted whenever we post new content. We're constantly researching and creating videos about psychology, relationships, mental health, and personal growth. Each video gives you tools to understand yourself and others more deeply, to recognize harmful patterns before they take root, to build the life and relationships you truly deserve. Your mental health and emotional safety are worth this small investment of attention. Remember that understanding dark empaths is just the beginning. The real work happens in your daily choices, in the boundaries you set or don't set, in the relationships you maintain or walk away from, in the trust you place in yourself versus the doubt others try to instill. Stay vigilant but not paranoid. Stay open but not naive. Stay kind but not self-sacrificing. The balance between these qualities is where true wisdom lives. You now possess information that most people never learn until after they've been deeply hurt. Use it wisely. Use it to protect yourself. Use it to help others. Use it to create a life where your empathy is given to people who honor it rather than exploit it. You deserve that life. Go build it, starting today, starting with the choice to trust yourself more than you trust someone else's manipulation. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video where we continue uncovering the truths that set you free.